Hello, everyone. Welcome to our third virtual meetup. Can you hear me? Can I see some waves, thumbs, whatever in the chat to see if you can hear me? It's always. I think you can hear me. Cool. So tonight it's all about Jetpack Compose. But before we start, a little bit about what is the Dutch Android user group. For everyone new here, Dutch Android user group is founded in 2011. We have more than 1,200 members already, purely on Android focused. It's free, and monthly we try to organize action-packed meetup. We consist of 4 organizers: Josino, Rob, Dion, and Yolanda. I'm Dion, by the way. Maybe Yolanda and Rob, I think they're in the chat. Raise your hands or wave. Yeah. Cool. Where can you find us? You can find us on DutchAUG.org. This is our meetup page, the one you probably already found and RSVP'd for this evening. If you didn't and you found our live stream right away or via Twitter, you can follow us there for future events. For discussions, questions, all other stuff, we have a lot of discussions going on in our Slack group. You can find it on dutchaug.org/Slack. I would, yeah. We consist of multiple meetup groups. On the left, you see Dutch Android User Group. That's us. We belong to the GDG NL group. And also part of that is the Women Tech Makers group and GDG Cloud Netherlands. You can find more information on gdgnl.app for about us, the organizers, and future events. About tonight, well, currently busy with the introduction, and you just saw the nice 30-minute long intro. After that, Alex will start off with his introduction to Jetpack Compose. Then we have a short break of 10 minutes, and after that, we will dive deeper into Jetpack Compose and more about layouts, routing, theming, and testing. Afterwards, we have time for questions. Questions, you can put the questions in the chat. Alex, I discussed it with Alex. He's fine with picking up questions during his presentation, but he will be in charge of that. Otherwise, there will be room after the presentation for some questions. So just leave them in the chat, and you will notice quickly enough if they are picked up by the speaker or not. So that's about it. I'm about to introduce Alex, and he will start with the introduction on Jetpack Compose. Enjoy.
So, hi everyone. It's first of all nice to be here and nice to speak about Jetpack Compose. Thank you, organizer, for inviting me. And today I will have two pretty small presentation about Jetpack Compose, and we start with introduction. After a short break, we will have a bit more deeper presentation. But before speaking about Jetpack Compose, I want to start speaking with a current view framework, because Jetpack Compose appeared because of current view framework, and probably we had some issue with it. And that's the reason, and that's the answer for current view framework is Jetpack Compose. So before starting speaking about current view framework and Jetpack Compose, I want to start with important releases which we have for building UI in Android. So first of all, we had release of Android 1.0 in 2008. Later on was pretty big release in 2013. It was release of Android Studio. I personally started before Android Studio. I remember Eclipse. I remember a lot of plugins, and it's not always working well. And I believe that people who started before Android Studio feel pretty comfortable with writing UI in XML, because it was only one way to really build a UI, because with Eclipse it was a bit complicated. Later on, we had release of Recycler View, and I hope right now all applications use Recycler View. However, before Recycler View, we had the list view. And from my perspective, the main problem of the list view is that we haven't really rules how to use it. We haven't really used best practices. People just using like a scrollable element and list view didn't try to recycle it because of implementation. When we use recycler view, we should implement view holder, and it's already speed up some development and performance, of course, for recycler view. A few years after it, we had release of constraint layouts that I believe right now it's using in almost all new modern application. And we have release of support design library, which has, as example, snack bar, which had, because right now it was replaced with Android X set of libraries. And next year we had pretty big release of material design component, and before it, some year before it, many developers and designer already switched to material design, and it's also was announced by Google, and even right now many applications use it. And have it set of libraries which we can use and customize it pretty easy. It's always good. And after it, we had release of Jetpack Compose. So before speaking about Jetpack Compose, let's start with current view framework. As anything pretty big as current view framework, and it's used by millions of applications and a lot of developers, probably as any solution, it has some drawbacks and sometimes problem. So let's start from the very beginning. When Android was announced, all UI component was built inside Android. And very often, even right now, when you have device, one or two updates for device usually available. Sometimes you even can find devices without any update. And if you imagine in this moment that your some view which is built inside the ROM have an issue, and you as a developer try to really fix it, it will be super complicated, because you really should wait for update. And later on was created support libraries, support design library, and right now we have set of Android X libraries. So one of biggest Android issue is fragmentation. And as you can see here, it's methods from the text view. And even here, we should support many different device versions. And sometimes for one feature, we have multiple implementation. And of course, for developers, it generates some problem. The big next issue is inheritance for building UI. If we take a look at text view, it's more than 13,000 lines of code, but text view extends view, which is more than 29,000 lines of code. And we have pretty small button. But the main problem is that when we speak about button, we have all possibility from the text view and all possibility from the view. And we can pretty easy from Java, Kotlin, or XML make our button selectable, because we just can reuse methods and property which already available for us. And of course, such button is pretty strange looking button because it's non-familiar pattern for the mobile. And so one of latest and not so important issue is code duplication. If you take a look and if you create a lot of custom components, you should always write 4 similar constructor each time. Only 2 differences between them. It's first of all name of constructor, and after it we have attribute set, and that's all. For all other stuff, you should write fully the same constructors. And of course, it's for us as for developers, it's just code duplication. And if you take a look at this example, it's a checkbox. And as you can see, checkbox have almost no functionality because everything already implemented in compound button, text view, and view. And checkbox already have all functionality, and this view shouldn't implement anything. And from my perspective, it's look a bit strange, but it's how it look like and which problem we have with current solution. So a year ago was announced Jetpack Compose. Right now it's in developer preview version. And what is very important, the Jetpack Compose is solution which was built absolutely from scratch. Under the hood, it didn't use current view framework at all. Everything which is rendered on screen just draw on top of the canvas. So let's start with small features and small requirements for Jetpack Compose. First of all, it's fully unbundled from the Android operation system. It don't use current view framework, it's just a library which draw on the canvas. It means that if Jetpack Compose has an issue, we should update version of the library and probably this issue will be solved. Or we as a developer can use other implementation. And when user updates the app, problem also will be solved. The next feature, which is not available yet, is interoperability with current view framework. Later on will be available generate view annotations, and using these annotations, we can, during compilation, will be generated a view from composable function, and we can use it in XML or our code from Java or Kotlin. And one of requirements for right now, it's Android Studio 4.1. And it's pretty important because Jetpack Compose, it's not only library, it has only plugin. So whole Jetpack Compose solution split it between 3 big components. It's runtime, and part of it runtime already during building already available in application, and part of it runtime already available in Android Studio 4.1. Because Jetpack Compose deliver with preview functionality. And we can run we don't need to run our application on emulator. Inside Android Studio, we have preview and we can see how it's working. And it's super cool for development because it's really speed up development. Our development starts faster because we don't lose our time for running application after it changes to see how it's look like on device. The next important thing is plugin. And right now it's not really official plugin of Kotlin. It's specific version of plugin which make possibility for Jetpack Compose be workable, because Kotlin plugin has current plugin for Jetpack Compose use some undocumented feature from Kotlin plugin. As I know, these features will be available in next version of Kotlin 1.4, and right now we have 2 different plugins, and here we have one drawback. We cannot really use a latest version of Kotlin. The available version of with this plugin, it's Kotlin. It's few releases ago. It's 1.3.7t. It's pretty high version, but not the latest one. And after it, we have set of UI libraries. It's UI libraries for the framework. It's UI library for material design components, for animations, for core, and much more. So let's take a look at pretty basic examples, and let's try to build pretty small calendar view which show around 4 weeks for us. So first of all, we need to create composable function, and for it we need to use composable annotation, and from other perspective it's usual function which have parameters, and these parameters can be usual normal Kotlin types. So first of all, we need to draw a circle, and for drawing a circle we can use surface, and surface even have parameter shape, which allow us pretty easy to draw a circle. We also can play with modifiers, which help us to define size, sometimes animation, and much more. And we also can define some border. However, surface have much more possibility, but this possibility is important for us. Later on, we want to show name of the month, date, and number and name of day week. So for it, we need to create a container, and this container help us to place all items in the middle of a screen, and for it we can use box with gravity top center. And later on we can use our first layout, it's column. It's pretty similar to linear layout, one of version of linear layout. And later on we can add three text and three text function, and all function like a text, image, box, and surface, it's also composable function. So right now we have a calendar item, and we want to really see how it look like inside Android Studio. And for it, we can use preview annotations. In our class, we can add as many as we want preview annotation. However, here we should remember about RAM. Android Studio prefer it a lot of RAM, and if we will add a lot of preview functions, RAM will be lose pretty fast. So if you add 2, 3, or 4, it's not a big problem. However, you can add much more, and when you save your code, and all these preview functions should be redrawn inside Android Studio, and of course it's take a time. Inside preview function, it's usual composable function, and we also can use here different elements and layouts. As example, in the second case, we can use row layout, and row layout allow us to place all elements in a row, and we can add small spacer between our elements. So right now, the most interesting and the most powerful part of Jetpack Compose, because Jetpack Compose really integrated with Kotlin, and we can use power of Kotlin and power of programming language to build an UI. So we can just call our composable function, and if you want to draw whole week, we can use a calendar week. It's our custom function, calendar week, and inside this calendar week, we just use row layout and place all item in a row and repeat it 7 times just for simplicity, and we have whole week. Later on, we can combine it with a calendar function, and inside calendar function, we will place all our weeks in a column. And in this pretty simple way, we can have our calendar view. However, this is very important moment. When we use a calendar item, we always use the same values. For Jetpack Compose, it's not a problem. Later on, we will talk about state, but it was added just for simplicity of this example, and show how it can be powerful without additional code. So we have composable function. We can preview this composable function, and right now we really want to add it to our application. So activity still is entry point of our application. However, right now, when we have one activity and multiple fragments, it's pretty popular. So what we can do is we can add to our onCreate method set content function, and inside the set content function we can call our composable function. The same function we also have for view group, and it means that we can add it to the fragment. and everything will work. So let's take a look about main feature of Jetpack Compose and composable function. Because it's fully different solution. As example, when we have current solution and we want to update state on our device, we should call the function the second time. As example, the pretty popular example is changing visibility of the view. We always call set visibility. Approach of Jetpack Compose is a bit different. Composable function can be recomposed when they store a state and the state was changed. If we use not state but like type like a string or any other primitive types and not extend as a mutable state, it wouldn't be changed. It draw it once and wouldn't be redraw anymore. However, if we have state, and in this example, our counter has a value, and we have this value. We have this value because our count is part of mutable state. And very important news here is that if value of the variable with mutable state is changing, function will be automatically recomposed. We as developers should do nothing for it. It will be automatically recomposed because state was changed. And it's pretty important feature of Jetpack Compose, and it's make it so powerful because right now we can build pretty small component and we have some small logic inside this component. And we shouldn't store state, sometimes global state, just to update everything. Every business logic responsible for drawing component will be inside the component. However, if we have mutable state and try to save a list, it wouldn't be updated. And if we need it, we really need to use model list. And speaking about model list, model list will composable function will track any changes for state and for model list. If it's change in model list, like element was added or removed or updated, this function will be also re-invoked. So in this case, we create model list of counter, and each counter is have property count. So in this case, if we try to add one more item to our model list, function will be re-invoked and counter will be increased each time when we press plus. It's pretty important part for Jetpack Compose, and it's really mandatory part for using in correct way this way. Before it, even day before yesterday, because yesterday was the latest release, model annotation was used pretty well. But some time ago, probably around a week ago, was news that in the next version, model annotation will be deprecated. And start from yesterday evening, it's deprecated. That's why I excluded model annotation from this presentation. Because right now it's deprecated and it was replaced with state. It's not really replaced, but previously we also had a state, but but in addition to it, we had pretty powerful model annotations. But starting from yesterday evening, it was deprecated, and in 2 weeks, probably it will be fully removed. So I think we can have right now pretty short break, and after it, when we come back, we will have a discussion about layout, styling, theming, and testing.
Yes. Thanks a lot for the first presentation. I want to check if there are any last minute questions because we have time enough. We are 6 minutes early because we also started earlier after the welcome presentation. Anybody have a question? I cannot start the music right now, but I will during the break to break the silence. Yes, no. If there are no questions, I can start to break earlier. Yeah, I have one. Let me type. Okay, awesome. We're gonna wait. So yeah, so basically, one more thing. You had to adjust your presentations last evening because there were last minute changes. That's correct.
Yes.
Because okay.
Uh,
Oh, there's a question about that. Yolanda said, "How often do you get updates?"
yes, Jetpack Compose have a new release every 2 weeks, and of course, as usual, latest release night before presentation. Fortunately, it wasn't a lot breaking changes, and it was week ago announced that model will be removed. And before this release, I already adapt application to it. But yeah, that's why I don't recommend really use it in production for right now, because when you have changes, uh, you can base all your UI on some features like model annotation, and later on you should rewrite it because in next version it will be deprecated. Right now releases is much more stable. I mean, not releases but changes much more stable, because 3 4 5 releases ago it was a very popular case when something was fully removed, and you open your project, try to compile, you have compile error, you read documentation, you don't have a lot of information in documentation and it was removed. Sometimes package can be changed and it's always not compiling. And yeah, playing with Jetpack Compose, it's a lot of fun. However, we have an official Slack channel from developers of Jetpack Compose, and you can always ask question and everyone try to help you to fix any problem. But we have releases every 2 weeks with
So
Jetpack.
yeah, thanks for the answer. So there are a lot of releases, but to make sure that you know what has been released and what has changed, you have a Slack channel you can join.
Yeah.
And can you repeat the Slack channel that you can find the information?
In Slack channel, it's Kotlin Lang. It's the official Slack channel of Kotlin, and in this channel you have a channel which is called Compose,
Cool.
and you can find all information in this Slack channel.
Cool. I will try to find it and post it in the chat later on. If someone else can find the link and can post it, that would be great. Another question. So when do you choose to work with Compose over the standard XML layout?
Uh, it's very depends. It very depends on the application. However, with Jetpack Compose, we have composable function which is called Android View, which was also added pretty recently. And using this function, you can draw inside composable function your XML layout. It means that possible migration in future, wouldn't be so complicated because you can reuse it. In the next part, in the second part, we will also talk about routing, because routing is pretty important part, and it really depends which way of routing you choose, because you have few ways, and during routing I'll just show more examples when which options we have. In practice, if you right now prefer to play with Jetpack Compose, of course I recommend just to play with Jetpack Compose, because right now it's not a good option to use it, because it can be break every 2 weeks. Fortunately, it's not break the project so often, but it's possible solution. It's possible problem. It's not a really solution.
Yeah. Let's do two more short questions. I think I saw another one from Stageblade. What is the benefit of doing your layout like this? Basically repeating a little bit.
Uh, uh, yes. Benefits of doing layout. I assume doing layout with as a composable function and as a part of the Kotlin. So first of all, Jetpack Compose has super powerful mechanism for doing theming and styling, which solve really a lot of problem. And we will talk also later about it. And as example, you can reuse part of the code. As example, you can create your constant and use this constant between different different functions. However, the most important is that it's not really correct to compare uh, XML file and Kotlin file, because it's two different approach. When you use XML, you should do everything manually. When you have compose, you have state, and if something changed, it will be recompose. It's not just a replacement of XML. It's fully other way of building UI. And I think it will be more clear at the end of presentation, because you will see more information about more examples about layouts, about theming, routing, and much more. And it will be just more clear, because right now I assume it can be a lot of questions.
Cool. And then the last question from Eugene. I see a lot of people already playing with Compose. How far is it from production state?
Far away.
Far away.
Because right now it's developer preview. What is developer preview? Developer preview is something like pre-alpha. It's not even alpha and not even beta. However, recently they do a lot of optimization for how composable function will be rendered, but not a lot of changes connected with API. Of course, we have some changes, but I think it's more or less clear how it will look like in the future.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot. Let's go over to the break. For everyone, we will be back in about 9 minutes, and get something to drink if you want, to snack. This time we are not providing it. Luckily, I didn't see anyone complaining about no pizzas this evening. However, we see you back in around 8 minutes for the next talk, going more into other topics on Jetpack Compose. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in around 9 minutes. Bye.
See you.
And we're back. Next up is Alex again with the talk about layouts, routing, teaming, and testing, going more in depth about Jetpack Compose. I leave it up to you, Alex.
Yeah, we can start. Yeah, just for people who joined a few minutes ago, maybe just a short summary of the first session. So Jetpack Compose was created fully from scratch. It's not something from Vue framework. It's a fully new tool, and it's fully different approach for building UI. And state is very important in Jetpack Compose because if state is changed, function will be recomposed, and you as a developer should do nothing for it. And for building a state, we can use a mutable state option, and mutable state option can be passed to the as a parameter to our composable function and can be initialized inside or outside the function. So for building state, we can create usual class, and all one of properties of all property can be of mutable state type if it's needed. However, if we really want to store and follow the state of list of data, as example, list of emails, list of tweets, we can use model list. And for model list and for state, it's something trackable for composable function, and it means that it's yes. And can you hear me, or maybe it should be a bit louder? Can you hear me right now? Please let me know. Sorry, can you hear
Here,
me?
here it sounds fine if I watch the stream. So I think you
Okay.
can continue.
Okay, yeah, cool. Uh, yes, and we can use state for watching for one object. If we want to have observe multiple object inside composable function, we can use model list for it. So let's speak about layout. And yeah, I already saw a question about building in row and columns, and answer is not really, because right now we have four layouts. It's row in column. If we combine them, we will have something like linear layout. We also have stack, which help us to place element based on gravity, as example, in the center of the screen, top right corner, etc. And we have constraint layouts. And it means that even right now we can play with constraint layout and building UI in pretty similar way as we build right now. However, as developer said on one of the talk, that before release we will have fully featured constraint and motion layouts. It means that right now people pretty familiar with constraint layout and motion layout, and inside in Jetpack Compose we will have the same tool, and it should be pretty familiar for people. Of course, building stuff with constraint layout in Jetpack Compose a bit different, but the concept is the same. So let's take a look at different layouts. Let's start with a row. So here we have just pretty simple example. Here we have an image and a text field. And if we wrap these two views in a row, all these items will be placed in a row. If we wrap them in a column, they will be placed in a column. And in this case, I believe that it's super similar to linear layout with vertical and horizontal orientation. The next layout, from my perspective, it's more addition to different layouts. It's a stack because it's super complicated to build a good looking layout on different devices with stack, because here we can use only gravity. As example, for a favorite, we can use top and corner, and from this perspective everything is fine. However, if we try to place our text in the middle, it probably will be overlapped with an image, and we cannot really do something with it. And of course, it's problem of stack layout. However, from my perspective, it's a great addition to different layout. Inside container, we can position everything based on gravity, and it can be very helpful. So speaking about constraint layout, the very important part that constraint layout have two sections. First section is placed as parameters of the function and its constraint set. In constraint set, we define all our constraints, we set up them, and later on, inside our lambda, we can just use tag modifier, and our constraint will be found and applied to required composable function, as example image. And very important notes about modifier, because different people prefer and use different approaches. All example in this presentation use plus for combining modifiers. However, if you will use dot, it will work fully the same. Because if you try to learn it and you will read different articles, maybe watch different videos, you can find these two different approaches. However, these both approaches do fully the same. And modifier is super important in Jetpack Compose. It can be used for defining size, animation, opacity, a draw background, and much more. And that's a reason why we often need to combine them. So today I will show how to build application like this. Of course, it's available on GitHub. If you're interested, just let me know, and I'll after presentation post link to the repository. So in this case, we have master detail flow plus one addition screen. This application support like light and dark theme. And why I choose exactly this application? So first of all, it's pretty standard application. And if you open Play Store, go to the applications section, you can find a lot of pretty similar examples that a lot of applications follow master detail flow. We have list of data, we have detailed information about something. In this case, it's about coffee drink. I also added some small complexity, and in this application we have two types of cards. We have list item and extended version of the card. And if you take a look at toolbars for both of the screen, when we have list with short small items, we have icon of extended card. When we have list of extended card, we have icon for the list of small items. And I also edited just to show how powerful and that we can solve many cases in Jetpack Compose with fully similar approach. And this approach is very powerful. So let's start with building our list item. And for building for different screen, just for the presentation and in this repository, I use different approaches and different layouts just to show more and not show only as example row and column or constraint layout. I try to show different approaches. So first of all, we need to create a function, and this function can be composable. If we really want to use Jetpack Compose, it should be composable. And later on, we need to create an object for our state. So inside this object, only its favorite can be changed. Your favorite can be changed, and it means that our is favorite can be mutable state. And if it can be mutable state and this state will change, a whole composable function will be redrawn. So right now we have a state, we can pass it as a parameter, and I propose to build it with row and column layout. And first of all, we can split all our card into three sections. It's section with an icon, section with additional information like title and ingredients, and the last one it's a section with our favorite. So let's try to use boxes just to create for us uh, three blocks. And first of all, for the first blocks, we can use just preferred size for 72 dp. So if it will be 72 to 72 dp, it will be just created a box for this size. And the next part is to create a box for the favorite icon. And here we use size 40 to 72 dp. And for the center box, we can allow this box to use all available space. And for all available space, we can use weight. And it means that it will use all available space. So in this case, it's this weight modifier. It's also pretty similar to the linear layout. So I think question about or maybe not question, notes about var in data class. Still you can use, from my perspective, you should separate your rendering part with your UI and part with multi-threading connected with your business logic. And you can create different abstractions. And even in this example, I have different abstraction. And this data class I use only for updating UI. It have nothing connected with business logic. And if you can use all values and update whole object every time. But from my perspective, it's connected with UI and it will be changed very often. It's not needed to create a lot of immutable object. If it's business logic, yes, of course it should be doing in different ways with immutable stuff. So let's continue. And I don't know if it's visible, but in this section we have pretty small circle, and on top of the circle we have an image. So for building a circle, we can use a surface, and we already have predefined circle shape. And preferred size of our box and our surface is 72 to 72 dp, and we have padding. It means that real size of the circle will be 40 to 40 dp. And if we place our image inside this surface, a size of our image also will be 40 to 40 dp because it's what we have inside the container. And the next part, ideal candidate is to use column layout, and we can place our title of the coffee drink and list of ingredients. As you can see, in this way, you can build it pretty easy. And for the text composable functions, we also have a lot of parameters like a style. We have maximum amount of lines, and we can use overflow. And in this case, we can just use ellipse size. And very important, especially for styling modifier, is draw opacity, because in this case, both of the text has a black color, but looks fully different. And it's super important for creating theme and styles. And for the last items, we can use toggleable composable function. It's standard function, and this function allows you to create a custom function and not to use images as a top element, because very often we have image view and some business logic to change the image. However, in this case, when we use toggleable, when we press on it, state will be different, and based on this state, we can render our image. However, if we try to combine all this code, it's pretty big. And write this code once, it's not a big problem, but later on you should maintain it. And of course, in this moment, we can have a problem. But its composable function is still a function. And we can split all this code into different functions, and at the end have a code like this. that we can use row as a main layout, and inside this row we replace our logo block with additional information and our favorite. So inside additional block we have column layout and place title and ingredients. If we will use similar approach and we see that something wrong with our ingredients, we can easily find this function and go and fix it or improve it. However, if we have one pretty big function, it will be complicated. Because working with layout right now, it's for some screens can be pretty tricky because whole layout is pretty big. And when you find to try something, it can be not so easy. However, with Compose, we can create as many functions as we need for comfortable working with rendering information on the screen. Right now we have our list item, and what we can do, we can render our list item to the list, and for it we have adapter list, and to the adapter list we can put our, as example, list of coffee drinks or our collection. And later on, inside this adapter box, we can adapter list. Sorry, we can use a box and render our item inside it. However, we can complicate it a bit. So we want to add divider, but we wouldn't add divider from the beginning of the screen. We want to add divider after the icon. It means that we can create a constants for one of our layout and use it for inside list item for the box for the side of the image, and later on we can use it inside divider and add padding for the same size. And as you can see, later on, we need to wrap all our list item and divider inside column. And when we finish it, our UI will look in this way. So, a very important part of any application is a toolbar. In Jetpack Compose, we have different up bars. We have top up bar, like a traditional toolbar or up bar, and we have bottom up bar, which can be used for bottom navigation. So speaking about top up bar, of course, it's a function and have multiple parameters. However, one of the most interesting parameters is title. Usually when we speak about toolbar, we can set just a text. If we want to add, as example, some layout inside the toolbar, we should create additional layout in different file, and sometimes it can be pretty tricky to place it. However, for top up bar, title is a composable function, and we can render everything which we need inside this composable function. As example, we can easily add a row with image and a text, and it's will be super simple because title is composable function. So, and we have actions, and actions it's something like menu items, and for adding actions we can add icon button, which already have on click method, and inside this method as a body we can add our icon and draw our icon as we need. However, we have two different options for two different icons. So in this case we can create our state, and for this case we can use mutable state. Car type will use isDetail item property, and it will be of mutable state of Boolean type. And inside our action, we can just use if to check the value and use different icons based on this value. So in this case, we can pretty easy add some small logic, which is from my perspective missing part for the XML, because we can add pretty simple logic like this in XML only using data binding. And here we can have small component, and inside this component we can have small business logic. And for the next screen, we can use constraint layout. And as we talked before, constraint layout has two sections. It's section with all our UI elements, which we have in a Lambda, and it's our constraint set. So when we want to create a constraint, I really recommend start with creating a constant. So when we have a constant, it should be string constants. And later on, inside the constraint set, we need to create a tag, and key for this tag it will be our constant. And later on, we can define our constraint and assign it to the UI element using modifier tag. Yes, in this case, it can be assigned and used and work very well. So let's concentrate. Let's concentrate on building our UI, and for building UI, for building constraint, we can just use different constraints. And in this case, we use top, bottom, left, and right, and we can have constraint to the parent. It will be our container, or to the different constraint like a header. And in this case, with logo constraint, we will place our logo inside our header, because top of our header is also top of our container, and bottom of our element it will be bottom of header. It's whole brown container. So to be honest, all constraint layout look pretty similar. However, they usually much bigger. Because we have two different sections, and defining one constraint, it's much more lines of code that sometimes use row and column. However, it's still super powerful. So let's try to add some style changes for our text. And I recommend to start with substring. And in this screen, we will, inside description, we will try to find names of our current coffee and make it bold. And if we find name of other coffee drink, we can just make it italic and underline it. So for it, the first one which we can create is a create substring class, and this substring class will store value, start and end position of this value in our description. So the later thing, we need to create get substring and get substrings methods. I just skip it in this slide, and get substring return as the first substring with position of required text. In this case, it will be name of coffee drink, and get substring return list of substrings. So later on, we need to create our annotated string and add whole description. And later on, we can add different styles based on start and end position. That's why for substring class, we really need start and end position inside our description. And when we inside add style function, we can create a text span style. We can define font weight, size, and color. However, we can also define many other things, as example, text decorator for underlining it. And as you can see, it's also pretty easy to do. And for right now, the main difference with current solution is that for current solution, we need to, in a separate way, create our UI in XML file, and later on we need to bind to our UI from business logic, and later on merge it. However, with Jetpack Compose, we can do everything inside one function. And when we created this one component, this component can already add style for our text, place everything in the screen, and do some small business logic. As example, use if for different states of item and show different icons. So let's take a look at routing, because routing is main part of Android application. Usually an Android application have much more than one screen. And here we have two different options. for building routing. First of all, we can use traditional approach with activity and fragments, and the second way is to use state. And we even right now we have few libraries for routing inside Jetpack Compose, which is also use state. So activity is an entry point to our application, and if we split all our UI between different activities, each activity can render a Jetpack Compose code. It means that if each screen is a separate activity, we can easily we can easily so we can easily use start activity or do traditional navigation between fragments. So even if we want to use navigation component, it's based on fragment, and we can place on these fragments, and inside this fragment we can do some navigation, and each fragment it can be different UI. Yes, I see question from a chat. No, we don't need ID, because with Jetpack Compose we update everything inside the function based on input parameters which we have. We don't really need to do code like, as example, text view dot visibility gone. We don't really need to do it. We need to pass state, and based on this state, our whole composable function will be composed and created. And another approach which we have for building routing is to use state. So the first thing which we need, let's create a router destination. And here we have three screens. It's coffee drink screen, coffee drink details screen, and order coffee drink screen. Later on, we need to create our state. And in this case, inside our we use mutable state of a routing destination. And the final class is to router, and inside this class we can just have a function navigate to and change our state. And it means that when we use navigate to function and have different instance of router object, a change will be state will be changed. And the latest step, our app content in this case is our root function. It's our root composable function with which added to the activity. So first of all, we need to create router state. It will be a state of coffee drinks. It's first screen which we have an application, because inside state we have, in this case, default value. Later on, we create a router and pass our router state object with coffee drinks. It means that by default will be opened coffee drinks. And very important function here is crossfade. Crossfade allows us to replace one composable function to another. And in this case, one composable function, it's whole screen. As example, coffee drink screen, it's composable function, and it renders the whole screen. And inside this composable function, we have many smaller composable functions. So if crossfade receive value and this value is coffee drink, we just render our coffee drink screen. If this function will be different, we will render different screen, and this function also have pretty small animations, and application looking pretty natural. However, if you want to use it more beautiful, of course you can add more custom animations. About animation, I'll tell a few words at the end of the presentation. So right now we can go to the theming, because theming is also pretty important part. And right now many applications have dark and light theme. And if you create new applications, ideally you need to support it, because probably your competitors already do it. However, right now implemented light and dark theme and whole theming, it's not the easiest task. So we will try to build something like this. And if you take a look at material design guidelines and check color section, you can find that very often, as you can see on the screenshot, we have colors like primary, secondary, primary, variant, etc. And inside Jetpack Compose, colors, name of the colors inside color palette, they are fully the same. It means that we speak in the same language between designer and developers. And we can define, ideally, we can even get these colors from the designers and just apply them to our design. Uh, we have light color palette and dark color palette section. In dark color palette, we don't have a primary variant. We have only primary, secondary, and secondary variant and all other colors. And as you can see here, a lot of colors. As example, we have some pairs as example, primary and on primary, secondary and on secondary. Speaking about primary, speaking about all colors without on, it's all colors for backgrounds, backgrounds of the screen, backgrounds of item. And speaking about colors which start from on, it's colors from the text which will be placed as on some background. As example, primary, on primary text with on primary color will be placed on the primary background. And later on, we need to apply our palette to our application. First of all, if we want to support a dark theme based on device preferences, we already have function isSystem in dark theme. And we can initialize our color palette based on color palettes which we have. Later on, we have material theme composable functions, which is usually the first function inside our root function. And for the material theme, we can put our color. We can put colors. However, for preview annotation, we should also apply it, because without it, it wouldn't be assigned to our expected color. And sometimes you have some object, some text style. In this case, typography, it's a text style. And for the text style, font is great, everything is great, but color is different. And for the style, you can create copy of current style with different color. In pretty similar approach, we have for typography. And speaking about typography, it also sometimes can be tricky in current Android implementation with Vue framework, because very often we can have many custom components and use some font inside these custom components. So if we use this code inside a custom component and we use this view, everything is great. However, sometimes we can have a situation when we place our font inside the XML file and we assign it to different views. So in this case, it's super easy to forget to assign it. However, with Jetpack Compose, this situation a bit better. So first of all, right now we have small limitation. And this limitation is that right now we cannot work with the downloadable fonts. Right now we can work only with fonts inside resources. So first of all, we can create a font family for some fonts. In this case, I used Roboto. However, it's not a best font because it's already pre-installed to many devices, and very often it's color by default. But this font is just an example, and it's possible to use any other font. And for each font style, we can define a font style. For each resource font, we should define ID of this font, where it's placed on inside our application, weight of the color, and style. All this information you can find on the website when you download fonts. You always have all this information. And later on, we need to create our default typography based on typography object, and you will have already predefined tags. And it's fully the same tags which described in material design guideline. It means that if designers create something for you with color and with guidelines, and with guidelines, we can just override our tags. And if you see in your design that for this view you should use H1 tag, you can easily use it in the Jetpack Compose, and it really helps talk between designer and developer, because when we speak about tag H3, you always speak about the same thing, because right now sometimes it's super complicated to discuss. And here we have tags like H1, H2, H3, body, bottoms, and a lot of other predefined constants which are already available. If you want to use your own, you're available to use it without any problem. And here we also can use material theme function, and this function have two parameters, colors and typography. And about colors we talked before it, and we can also add typography. And for our text, we can use this example material theme dot typography dot tag. In this case, it's H5, and without copy style, it's the same as with color. We have some predefined style, or we can use also H5 tag, but everything is fine. Size is fine, a font style is fine, but color is different. And we can create copy of existing text style, but with different color. And it will also work pretty well. We have few questions. Does Compose advocating single screen apps? Right now, as I know, they don't advocating different correct approach. Right now, you can use different approaches. And right now, it's in pre-alpha version, and people just playing a lot with that. And many people, even during this playing with Jetpack Compose, prefer to do that one activity is one screen, and use just Android way to navigate in between the screen. In this project, I personally use composable way with states. It's just playing with Jetpack Compose, because right now activity and fragments have pretty powerful infrastructure. And one of issues which we have when you play with Compose way, each activity have life cycle. When you have only one function, you don't have life cycle. And you need to initialize few dependency which may be not needed for you because the screen is not open. Maybe later on Google will advocating for some approach, but right now people just playing with it, and I didn't find any recommendations as how should we use it right now. Maybe later on some stuff or some approach will be polished, or just Google will advocate for some approach, but right now people just playing with it. So the next question, if everything is Compose widgets like Flutter. Approach is more or less similar, as I know, because I personally didn't work with Flutter, but approach is similar. However, it's under the hood, it's working in a different way. And very important know that if you run your application and try to use Layout Inspector, you can see only one view on Layout Inspector. This view called Compose view. It means that we cannot really use Espresso as example for testing, and we cannot really work with view in traditional way. However, under the hood of Compose, they used something is called slot table, and every function store some value in this slot table structure. It's a flat structure. It's not structure like a view tree. It's not a tree structure. And Jetpack Compose know how to find element inside this slot table and update require element, and this structure should work much faster than go through tree structure. What about a state rotating or mutable state? How does that work? Should it be bound to a view model? As I told right now, Google not advocating for any approach. Uh, right now, you can create view model, you can create live data, and you can observe live data. Recently was added support for coroutines and flow. In GitHub for this project, you also can find navigation created with flow. It's possible right now. It's also based on state. However, if we need to create need to create mutable state, we should also right now build some abstraction, because right now Google mostly concentrating on optimization and building UI, and later on maybe some ways of building it will be created. Because right now, if you really, the simplest way to work with state is to use activity, because you have callback, some stuff can be recreated. Right now I think it's possible to do save state during rotation, but you also need to write additional code for it. You can use any font as you need. So where do you organize theme and styles? Yeah, you can create separate file for it. I personally prefer to create separate file because it's connected with whole application, not only with small part of UI. Of course, you can use it, but probably you want to use whole style and theming for whole applications. In this example, I use different objects. Yes. Please tell us about performance and frame seconds of it. Last time I checked developer preview 02, it was a bit laggy. How was it? Right now situation much better. And as I know, at the latest release, developer preview 12, Google team work a lot on optimization, and right now it looks much better than at the beginning. Still maybe not ideal, because one of idea that you can render UI in different threads, and you can use coroutines for it, because right now in Android we can only do communication with UI on the main thread, and what they want to try is achieve possibility to use different thread for you can use different threads for this for updating UI. If it will be available, I believe it will be much faster. But I think right now it's too early to compare performance, because it's developer preview. I think it's a good moment to comparing it. It's during beta, because API is stable, and starting from this moment, developers, Google team will concentrate on optimizations. But it's much better than during developer preview version, because right now, as I can see from the changes in API, they try to add more and more features and not concentrating too much on some optimizations. However, on latest release, that do a really good improvement for it. So, do you like working playing with Compose? Yeah, I personally like it. I really prefer the way when you can create small component, add some logic inside this component, everything in one class, not class file. However, of course, first thing can be a bit complicated, because you should change your mind a bit, because it's fully different way of doing. You don't need to change visibility manually from other place. You should do it inside inside this small composable function. Right now, I really prefer this approach, and I'm waiting where it will be in production, because even in developer preview, it's pretty stable, and you can play and build pretty okay application. Of course, performance it's not super cool, but I believe later on it will be improved. Where can we download your PowerPoint? Yes, after the talk, I'll publish it at Speaker Desk, and you can find me by name and surname. However, right now it's placed old presentation for developer preview 8, and after this talk I'll update the presentation, and it will be latest presentation, and I'll share link to presentation at Twitter, and probably below the video when it will be published on YouTube. Yeah, project you can find also on GitHub, and I also add link. If you open probably Twitter, you can find my Twitter, you can find this project as one of last tweet. I also publish it below the video after the presentation. What about performance? I think I answer to this question. Right now it's not laggy. Right now it's working pretty well. However, I don't really have good device for test. I have OnePlus 7 Pro. It's pretty powerful device, and maybe on not so powerful devices it can be not so fast. On emulator it's also working pretty well. So let's come back to the testing. As I talked some comments before, we have only one view, and we cannot use Espresso, we cannot use Appium, UI Automator, or any other available framework. However, we have small framework together with Jetpack Compose. Yes. So we can add this framework to the project. And for this project, we have composable test rule, and this, So this test rule allows us to add set content to empty activity and run this activity. So we can write UI test. So the first thing, we can create our composable function. Not composable, extension function, launch coffee drink screen, and pass object which is really needed for this function. In this case is router, repository, and mapper. And we can, inside this function, have set content, and using this set content, we can just initialize our function. I prefer use these functions with all attributes, because in some cases you can use mock instances of router, repository, and mapper and configure them as you need, or you can use a real implementation and create a real object. So we need to add a composable rule. Inside setup or function, we can launch our screen, and later on we can have right now not too much. Right now only few methods like find by text, find by tag. We can use custom tags which will be used for testing, and find something by text, by substring or tag. And later on we can do some actions like click, and later on we can assert something. In these cases we just assert different text and subtext of the screen. It's look pretty similar to Espresso. From testing on device and emulator, its speed I think is comparable with Espresso in such cases. Maybe in other cases it will be a bit different. So In this case, we can create UI test for our application, and they will be pretty fast. So as you can see, even right now, Jetpack Compose, it's pretty big framework which has a lot of features and a lot of possibilities. Uh, and I just want to summarize some stuff and stuff which was uncovered until this moment. So Android has super powerful mechanism for working with resources. We have translations. We can also store images. It can be raster or vector images, and we can work with resources. For text, we can use string resource. I really want to show it because inside whole presentation, I used just hard-coded string just for simplicity, because it's much simpler to understand that some keys for our string. And we can use also stuff for resources. Right now, right to left is supported, and right to left is supported by different layouts. Right now, all layouts supported. Some time ago, row and column layout supported it, and constraint layout not really, but later on support was added. And right now, right to left mode supported for all layouts. And later on, we will have interoperability with current view framework. And as was announced at one of Google Talks, will be available generate view annotations. And during compilation, our view, traditional view based on composable functions will be created, and we can use it in Java or Kotlin or XML. So, and three also super important topic is animations. Animations right now available. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to talk about also animations, and they are supported. And for people who work with Flutter, animation is pretty similar. As I told before, I personally didn't work with Flutter, but many comments in the network that yeah, it's pretty similar to Flutter. Of course, some difference you can find, but approach is pretty similar to Flutter. And two views wouldn't be recreated from scratch. It's view for map and for web, because for map, drawing on the canvas, it's powerful, but using OpenGL is much more important. I previously work on navigation, as OpenGL is using a lot for navigation and for drawing the map. And it's no sense to just recreate it. And the same for web. Will be available wrappers for map and web views, and you will feel like you work with composable functions, already predefined composable functions, but under the hood you will have native Android views. So yes, localization is supported, because speaking about resources, you work with resources is in traditional Android way. Under the hood, it use context, because what you can do is you can use ambience and context. Ambient provide you access to the context. Ambient, it's something in Jetpack Compose world which provide you to externals API of Jetpack Compose as example for getting the context, because when you build UI you don't really need a context. Yes, localization supported even right now. And the most important now that it's in developer preview, I don't recommend to use it for production, because a lot of changes can break your production application. And I believe you wouldn't spend few days just for fixing one or few screens of your applications. However, I encourage you to explore more of Jetpack Compose. It's fully new approach. I personally like this approach. I think it allow us to create small UI components with some small business logic, and it will be easy to read and easy to support, because you can create functions as you really need. It can be one big function, many small functions, and you can create your own DSL for different screen and for different UI components. and later on it will be super readable. I will be happy. I will be happy to answer to all questions here or maybe later on Twitter. If you have, I also writing about Android development and Compose, and I want to invite you to my blog if you're interested in it, and I will answer to all of your questions.
Thanks a lot, Alex. Yeah, for clarification, it's also we have 10 seconds delay, so it might take a while before questions appear.
Okay.
Great presentation. Thanks a lot. Really nice. We were, I think, 20, 30 minutes over time, but I think it's okay because it was very interesting. A lot of questions are already asked and answered, which is really great. Does anybody else have a question for Alex before we round up? Let me see if I see questions coming in. I think most of them were already answered. Let's wait for a little bit longer. You get a lot of applause coming in very soon.
I'm happy that it was interesting and useful.
Yeah.
And still we are waiting. I'll just publish alt link to presentation at speaker deck, and right now I'll just upload this presentation, and probably latest version will be available on this link during half an hour or maybe faster. It depends on the server. Let me just publish link to the presentation.
Yeah. Stefan says the presentation was packed with useful information. Thank you, Alex. And Job says, really nice presentation. So a lot of compliments and claps. Amazing.
Yes, thank you for the feedback. I'm super happy that it's interesting and useful. I'll publish link to the presentation. Probably it's appear soon. Yeah, because this presentation, I believe, will be updated from time to time because API is always changing, and it's all about Jetpack Compose, but about a bit different Jetpack Compose.
There's one more question from Antonio. I will put it up. Nice talk. You mentioned before about the possibility of refreshing the UI from different threads. Any example you could share?
Not yet, because it's not implemented yet. It was announced, but not implemented yet. That's why I cannot really share any example.
Okay. Are you looking for the link that or did you already share it? Or will be shared? You can also share it later on your Twitter. Before we stop, so let me show. You can follow Alex on Alex Zhukovich. His Twitter is on the left of the screen. And you also mentioned his website earlier. Can you repeat it maybe?
alexzh.com.
Yes. If you haven't already, you can also join our Slack. We have discussions there. You can meet other Android developers or any other information surrounding the community of Android, focused on the Dutch Android community. And you can also follow us on DutchAUG, Dutch Android User Group on Twitter.
I'll also publish link to the presentation and to the project inside the Slack inside the Slack.
Perfect. More reasons for people to join.
Cool.
Cool. Okay. Then let's close. Thanks a lot for your presentation, and happy to have you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, and thank you everyone who joined.
Okay.